She woke up to a letter on her lap and a $100 bill inside. But when she followed its instructions, she uncovered a secret that would change everything she thought she knew about her past and her future. Who left this letter? And why does it feel like they know everything about me? A story about second chances, buried secrets, and a love she never saw coming. Watch until the end to uncover the truth even Sarah couldn't believe. Sarah Matthews pressed herself against the worn seat of the airplane, gripping her old leather purse like a lifeline. The steady hum of the engines vibrated beneath her, a constant reminder that this flight was carrying her toward an uncertain future. She exhaled shakily. Back home in Cleveland, her 2-year-old daughter, Emma, was probably clutching her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunk, asking her grandmother for the 100th time, "Where's Mommy?" The thought stabbed through Sarah's chest. She had never been away from Emma for more than a few hours. But this was necessary. She glanced down at the crumpled $300 tucked into her purse, the money she had borrowed from Mrs. Rodriguez, her elderly neighbor. "Sometimes we need a little help to change our stars, mija," the woman had said, pressing the bills into Sarah's trembling hands. Sarah had promised to pay her back as soon as she landed this job. She had to. The job interview at Meridian Technologies was her one shot at stability, at security, at finally giving Emma a life without hunger, eviction notices, or broken promises. As the plane lifted off the runway, Sarah clutched the armrests, whispering a silent prayer. Her phone, switched to airplane mode, held hundreds of photos of Emma. She swiped through them, her heart swelling and aching at once. Emma's gap-toothed smile, her wild curls bouncing as she twirled in a dress Sarah had found at a thrift store. Her tiny hands grasping Sarah's face, whispering, "Love you, Mommy." Tears burned Sarah's eyes. "I love you more, baby girl," she whispered under her breath. She had to make this work. Sarah leaned back, exhaustion settling into her bones. For the first time in weeks, she let herself close her eyes. She had barely slept since receiving the email. The job offer had come like a miracle, promising a decent salary, benefits, even company housing. A new beginning. She let herself drift, the gentle hum of the plane lulling her into darkness. Until a rustling sound jolted her awake. Sarah's eyes snapped open. The cabin was dim. Most passengers were asleep, bathed in the faint glow of reading lights. Something slid from her lap. Her heart skipped a beat. She reached down, her fingers brushing against a folded piece of paper. She froze. She hadn't brought a letter. Her pulse quickened. She hesitated, then picked it up. It was folded neatly, the edges crisp as if written just moments ago. Sarah swallowed, then opened it. Her breath caught as she read the first line. "To the tired mama in seat 23C. Her stomach tightened. Her gaze darted around the cabin, searching for who could have left it. No one was looking at her. The seat across the aisle, she vaguely remembered someone sitting there before, was empty now. Sarah's fingers trembled as she continued reading. "I see you. I see the exhaustion in your eyes, the worry in your grip. 10 years ago, I was in your shoes, and someone gave me a chance. Now, I'm paying it forward." Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred for a moment. And then, something fell from the crease of the letter. A crisp $100 bill. Sarah sucked in a breath. Her hands shook as she held it between her fingers. The paper felt real. Her mind raced. Who had done this? Why? Was this kindness or something else entirely? Her instincts screamed at her to be cautious. She had spent years learning that nothing in life came without a cost. Yet, as the letter rested in her lap, a single question burned in her mind. Was this a gift or a test? She turned the letter over, searching for a signature. There was none. Instead, at the very bottom, there was a small, hand-drawn coffee cup with steam swirling into the shape of a heart. Sarah stared at it. The symbol tugged at something in her memory, but she couldn't quite place it. Her hands tightened around the letter, her mind spinning. She looked up again, scanning the rows around her, but whoever had left this was gone. Had they even been real? She shook her head, swallowing hard. This had to be a trick. People didn't just hand out money, especially not to strangers on a plane. And yet, she glanced at the $100 bill, crisp and untouched. With a shaky breath, she carefully folded it back into the letter and tucked them both into her purse. Sarah's mind whirled with possibilities as the plane began its descent toward Seattle. The lights of the city stretched below her, twinkling like fallen stars. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the frantic beat of her heart. This wasn't just a flight anymore. It was the start of something bigger than she had ever imagined. And whatever waited for her in Seattle. She had a feeling it was only just beginning that Sarah's fingers trembled over the crisp $100 bill, her mind swirling between fear and hope. This was either an act of kindness or something too good to be true. She scanned the dimly lit cabin, her heart hammering. Who had left this letter? The seat across the aisle, empty. But someone had been sitting there before. She was almost certain of it. A woman. Blue blazer. Or had she imagined it? Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. The words from the letter echoed in her head. Someone gave me a chance. Now, I'm giving one to you. Was this fate? Or was there a price she didn't know about? Her mind drifted back to Cleveland. To the eviction notices piling on the kitchen counter. To the nights she had gone to bed hungry so that Emma could have a full plate. To the humiliation of counting pennies at the grocery store, pretending she wasn't starving. And worst of all, to him, her ex-husband. She could still hear his voice, laced with cruelty, the night he walked out. You'll never make it on your own, Sarah. But she was making it, even if it meant swallowing her pride and borrowing money just to take this flight. Even if it meant gambling everything on a job interview that might not even pan out. And now this letter. This unexpected, unexplainable gift. Sarah's fingers clenched around the paper as her thoughts spiraled. It had to be a mistake. This couldn't be for her. She should turn it in, give it to a flight attendant. Right? But what if it was for her? Her stomach twisted. She needed this money. Not for luxuries. Not for comfort. Just to get through tomorrow. A real meal. A taxi to the interview, instead of walking for miles in the cold. This could change everything. But what if there was a catch? Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Nothing in life is free, sweetheart. Sarah took a slow breath. She flipped the letter over, hoping for more clues. Nothing. Just that neat, rushed handwriting. A signature that wasn't a signature. A friend. She let out a shaky laugh. Some friend. Her eyes drifted back to the bill. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. Could she trust this? Her pulse pounded as she debated. Then, as if on instinct, she reached for the seat pocket in front of her. The letter had told her to check. Her fingers brushed against something. A hotel keycard. Sarah yanked it out, her breath hitching. The Westbrook Hotel, Seattle. She knew that name. It wasn't some rundown roadside motel. It was luxury. The kind of place she'd never set foot in. A cold chill ran down her spine. This wasn't a random act of kindness. Someone knew about her. Someone had planned this. Her mind reeled. She should refuse. Ignore it. Stick to her original plan. Take the bus. Sleep in the cheap motel she had booked. She had already calculated everything down to the penny. But as she stared at the bill in her hand, at the hotel key card, doubt crept in. This wasn't just a gift. This was a door. A door she had to choose whether to walk through. And for the first time in her life, Sarah wasn't sure if she should. The plane's wheels touched down with a jolt, sending a shudder through Sarah's already tense body. Her heart pounded in her ears as the reality of what lay ahead set in. She hesitated, then reached into the seat pocket as the letter had instructed. Her fingers brushed against something cool and smooth. She pulled it out. A hotel keycard. Her breath hitched. The Westbrook Hotel. She swallowed hard. That wasn't the dingy budget motel she had booked. That was luxury. The kind of place where businessmen and celebrities stayed. The kind of place she'd never even stepped foot in. The kind of place that was completely out of reach for someone like her. A shiver ran down her spine. This was getting too strange. Her phone buzzed in her lap. Sarah jolted, her breath catching. A text message. Unknown number. A driver will be waiting at baggage claim. Trust me, Sarah. Take the chance. Her pulse skyrocketed. Who was this person? How did they know her name? Her grip on the phone tightened, her instincts warring between suspicion and curiosity. This wasn't random. Someone had orchestrated this. But why? She turned the key card over in her hands, staring at the gold-embossed lettering. Take the chance. She could feel the weight of those words pressing down on her. She had two options. Ignore it. Take the bus to the cheap motel she'd booked. Play it safe. Take the risk. Accept this unknown offer. Go to the Westbrook and see where this mysterious path led. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And yet, wasn't this what she'd always hoped for? A chance. A miracle. What if? What if this was the moment that changed everything? The decision. The cabin filled with the sound of passengers unbuckling their seatbelts, retrieving their bags, stretching stiff limbs. Sarah didn't move. Her body was frozen in place. This choice, it felt bigger than it should. More than just a hotel. More than just a ride. It felt like a crossroads. She exhaled shakily, shoving the key card into her purse. She didn't know what she was walking into, but she was going. Because something in her gut told her this was meant to happen. Baggage claim, the driver. Sarah made her way through the crowded airport terminal, gripping the strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles ached. Baggage claim was a chaotic mess of weary travelers and squeaky-wheeled suitcases. Her heart thudded violently against her ribs as she scanned the sea of faces. Then, she saw him, an older man in a black suit, standing near the exit, holding a small white sign. Her name was printed on it. Sarah Matthews. She swallowed hard, legs trembling. This was real. She forced herself to step forward. The man caught sight of her and smiled warmly. "Ms. Matthews," he asked in a voice that was both polite and kind. Sarah nodded, still feeling like she was in a dream. "I'm Walter. I'll be taking you to the Westbrook tonight." He reached for her suitcase. Her first instinct was to pull back, but there was something genuine in his eyes. Something that made her believe, for just a moment, that she wasn't walking into some elaborate scam. Maybe, just maybe, this was exactly what it seemed. So, against every fear screaming at her to run, she let go and followed him out into the night. The ride to the Westbrook. The Blacktown car pulled smoothly onto the highway, the glow of city lights reflecting against the polished leather interior. Sarah sat rigidly in the back seat, hands folded in her lap, her mind racing. Walter, the driver, must have sensed her unease. "You don't have to worry," he said, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "I've been doing this a long time. I promise you're safe." Sarah forced a nod, but the tension in her shoulders didn't ease. "Do you do this often?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Walter smiled. "Drive people to mysterious, prepaid luxury hotels in the middle of the night." He chuckled. "Not every day, but let's just say, I've seen some lives change because of rides like this." Sarah's stomach flipped. "So you know who set this up?" Walter hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Not exactly," he admitted. "But I know it's someone who believes in second chances." Her breath hitched. That phrase. It was the same exact wording from the letter. "Someone gave me a chance. Now, I'm giving one to you." Sarah turned toward the window, staring at the blurred city lights. Her reflection looked different somehow, like a woman on the verge of something enormous. She just didn't know what it was yet. Arrival at the Westbrook. When the car finally pulled up to the entrance of the Westbrook Hotel, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Marble floors, chandeliers, bellhops in tailored uniforms. It was like something out of a life she'd never been part of. Walter stepped out first, opening her door. "This is you, Ms. Matthews," he said with a kind smile. Sarah hesitated, the weight of this decision pressing down on her all over again. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and into the unknown, the front desk and the package. The receptionist greeted her with a knowing smile. "Welcome to the Westbrook, Ms. Matthews." Sarah's stomach twisted. She'd never set foot in this hotel before, and yet they had been expecting her. The receptionist slid an envelope across the counter. "This was left for you earlier today." Sarah's fingers trembled as she picked it up. Her name was written on the front in the same handwriting as the letter from the plane. Her breath came in short bursts as she slowly peeled open the flap. Inside, a note, and a second key card. The note read, "This isn't just about a job, Sarah. It's about your future. Someone has been waiting for you." She blinked. What did that mean? Someone had been waiting for her. Her stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just about kindness anymore. This was something bigger. And for the first time since stepping onto that plane, Sarah Matthews wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth. The Westbrook Hotel lobby gleamed under the warm glow of chandeliers, casting shimmering reflections on the polished marble floors. Sarah stood frozen just inside the entrance, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Everything about this place felt too extravagant, too surreal, like she had stepped into a world she wasn't supposed to belong to. And yet, someone had arranged for her to be here. "Miss Matthews." Sarah turned sharply. The receptionist, a woman with a crisp uniform and a professional smile, was watching her expectantly. "We've been expecting you." Sarah's pulse jumped. Her breath came in short bursts as she stepped forward. "Expecting me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. We have a package for you." The woman slid a cream-colored envelope across the counter. Sarah's fingers trembled as she reached for it. The handwriting on the front was familiar. "Miss Morrison." Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew that name. Catherine Morrison, CEO of Meridian Technologies, the company where she had an interview tomorrow. The woman who was supposed to decide her future. Sarah's hands shook as she peeled open the envelope. Inside was another note. "If you're reading this, you've made the right choice. But there's more to this story than you know. Meet me in the hotel bar in 15 minutes. It's time you learn the truth." A shocking connection. Sarah's thoughts spiraled. This wasn't just about a random act of kindness. This wasn't some anonymous stranger helping her out of goodwill. Catherine Morrison knew who she was, had been expecting her, had planned this. The realization sent shivers down Sarah's spine. She had spent weeks preparing for this interview, researching everything about Meridian Technologies. And Morrison's name had been everywhere. A brilliant and ruthless leader. A woman who had taken a struggling company and built it into an empire. But Sarah had never expected their paths to cross like this. Why would a billionaire CEO be personally involved in her life? And more importantly, what did she want? The meeting in the hotel bar. Sarah forced her feet to move. The elevator ride to the bar felt like a lifetime. Her heart pounded in her chest as the doors opened to a dimly lit lounge, bathed in the warm glow of candlelight. And there, sitting in a corner booth, was her, Catherine Morrison. Her silver hair was pinned in an elegant chignon, her sharp eyes watching Sarah over the rim of a crystal glass. She was poised, powerful, unshakable. Sarah's throat tightened. This woman controlled billion-dollar deals. What could she possibly want with a broke, single mother from Cleveland? "Sit down, Sarah," Morrison said smoothly, gesturing to the seat across from her. Sarah hesitated, then obeyed. As soon as she sat, Morrison slid another envelope across the table. "You must have questions," she said. Sarah nodded slowly. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "You wrote the letter, the one on the plane?" Morrison's lips curved slightly. "Not exactly." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Then who did?" Morrison exhaled, folding her hands on the table. "Someone who has been watching over you for a very long time." Sarah's head spun. Watching over her. Her hands clenched in her lap as she swallowed hard. "I don't understand," she admitted. Morrison studied her for a moment, then tapped the envelope. "Read it." Sarah's hands shook as she pulled out the letter inside. And when she saw the handwriting, her breath left her lungs. Because it was the same handwriting as the letter from her father. The one he had written before he died. The one she had kept in her bedside drawer for 5 years. A letter from the past. Sarah's vision blurred. Her fingers traced the familiar loops of the letters, her father's words staring back at her. She blinked rapidly, forcing herself to focus. "Sarah, if you're reading this, it means the time has come. The truth about our family, about what was taken from us, it's time for you to know. I couldn't protect our legacy in the way I wanted to. But there was someone who could. Catherine Morrison. And now, she's here to give you back what should have been yours." Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her. Her father and Morrison knew each other? "What is this?" she choked out. Morrison's expression softened, just slightly. "Your father and I were business partners. Best friends. Until the day he died." Sarah's stomach dropped. Her father had owned a company once. A small tech firm he had poured his entire life into. Until he lost it. Until everything collapsed. Until her family was left with nothing. Sarah shook her head. That company, it was bought out. He lost everything. Morrison's gaze was steady. "No, Sarah," she said quietly. "It was never lost. It was protected." Sarah stilled. What are you saying?" Morrison leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. "Your father didn't lose his company, Sarah. He merged it into Meridian. He did it to keep it safe. And now, it belongs to you." Sarah's entire world tilted. Her father's company was part of Meridian, and Morrison was saying that she had a right to it? Sarah's hands curled into fists. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Morrison sighed. "Because your father didn't want you to grow up with the weight of it. He wanted you to find your own path first." Sarah swallowed hard. "So why now? Why me?" Morrison smiled. "Because, Sarah, it's time for you to step into the role that was always meant to be yours." Sarah couldn't breathe. Everything she thought she knew had been a lie. She had spent years struggling, fighting to survive. And all this time, there had been a fortune in her name, a legacy waiting for her. Everything was about to change. Sarah's hands trembled as she looked up. Morrison was still watching her. "So, Sarah," she said softly, "are you ready to learn the rest of the truth?" Sarah's heart pounded. She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. She had come too far to turn back now. She was ready. The hotel bar was dimly lit, casting golden reflections across polished mahogany tables. Sarah's heart pounded as she stepped forward, her pulse thrumming like a war drum. At a secluded corner booth, two figures waited. A woman in a blue blazer, and a man whose face sent a jolt of shock through her chest. Sarah froze. Not just any woman. Rebecca Morrison, Catherine Morrison's daughter. And the man. Sarah's breath hitched. James Wilson, her father's best friend. The man who had vanished from her life after her father's sudden death. Sarah's throat tightened. "What's going on?" she whispered. Rebecca and James exchanged a glance. Then, Rebecca slid another envelope across the table. "Read it," she said softly. Sarah hesitated, then picked it up. The paper felt heavy in her hands. She unfolded it, and her father's handwriting stared back at her. A letter from the past. "Sarah, if you're reading this, then the plan worked. The company is safe, and so are you. But now, it's time for you to know the truth about your inheritance." Sarah's world tilted. Inheritance? Her vision blurred. James leaned forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Your father never lost his company, Sarah," he said softly. "He merged it with Meridian Technologies." Sarah's breath hitched. Her father's company wasn't gone. James's gaze was intense. "He didn't just protect the business," he continued. "He made sure his daughters would one day own it." Sarah's stomach dropped. Daughters. Her eyes snapped to Rebecca, who was already watching her. Tears glistened in Rebecca's eyes. "We're sisters, Sarah." Sarah's chest constricted. Her sister. A stranger she had never known. A stranger who had been living the life she had been denied. Sarah's hands curled into fists. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she demanded. Rebecca exhaled shakily. "Because it wasn't safe." Sarah's blood ran cold. A buried truth. Rebecca slid another document across the table. Sarah hesitated, then picked it up. Her father's name was on the top. A legal agreement. Signed the day before he died. Sarah's fingers shook. "What is this?" she murmured. James's jaw tightened. "Your father knew someone was trying to take the company from him," he said. Sarah's head snapped up. "Who?" Rebecca's expression darkened. "A former business partner. Someone who wanted him gone." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Gone?" James's gaze was sharp. "Your father's death wasn't an accident, Sarah." A chill shot down her spine. The betrayal. The car accident. The one that had killed her father. The one they had all assumed was fate. Sarah's pulse thundered. "Are you saying?" James's voice was grim. It was orchestrated. Sarah gripped the table for support. "Who?" she whispered. Rebecca's expression was hard. "We don't know yet." Sarah's head spun. Everything she had believed was a lie. Her father had been murdered, and someone had been hiding it for years. Sarah inhaled sharply. "Why now? Why tell me this now?" James's gaze was steady. "Because tomorrow isn't just an interview, Sarah. It's your first step toward reclaiming what was stolen." Sarah's breath caught. The choice. Rebecca studied her. "We need you, Sarah," she said. "We need to finish what Dad started." Sarah's hands clenched. She had spent years fighting to survive, struggling for crumbs, while her father's legacy had been waiting. And now, she had two choices. Walk away, or fight for the truth. Sarah's heart pounded. And deep down, she already knew her answer. She lifted her gaze. "Tell me everything." James's expression softened. Rebecca exhaled, nodding. And as Sarah listened, she realized this was only the beginning. The envelope felt heavier than it should. Sarah's fingers shook as she traced the worn edges, her father's handwriting scrawled across the front. This was it. The last words of a man she had lost too soon. Her throat tightened. Slowly, she unfolded the letter. Her father's voice seemed to echo through the words. "One last thing, sweetheart. James, he's always been family. If you ever get the chance, let him show you how much he cares. Because if there's one thing I know, it's that love, real love, doesn't walk away." Sarah's chest constricted. She turned to James. His gaze was steady, but behind it was 5 years of unspoken love. A love he had never been allowed to express. Tears blurred her vision. James took a deep breath. "I promised your father I'd look after you. But Sarah," his voice cracked, "I wasn't just doing it for him." Sarah's heart pounded. She thought of every moment. The mysterious financial help. The unwavering presence. The way he had always been watching over her from afar. Her father had known. James had always been more than a protector. He had been waiting. For her. For this moment. Sarah's breath shook. For the first time in years. She didn't feel alone. She had a family. A future. And, for the first time in her life, she had a choice. A new beginning. 6 months later. Seattle felt like home. Sarah stood in the Meridian Technologies boardroom, wearing a sleek, tailored suit, the same one Rebecca had given her that night. But this time, it wasn't borrowed. It was hers. She had earned this. The doors opened. James stepped in, his familiar, steady presence filling the room. "You ready?" he asked, his voice warm. Sarah smiled. More than ever. She had spent months rebuilding the company her father had left behind. She had found her place, her purpose, and most of all, she had found love. James reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate. Their fingers intertwined. Outside the office, a small voice giggled. "Mommy." Sarah turned, and Emma ran into her arms. The little girl beamed. "Uncle James took me to see the big bears at the zoo." Sarah's heart swelled. James chuckled, ruffling Emma's curls. "Did you like them, kiddo?" Emma nodded excitedly. "Can we go again tomorrow, Daddy?" Silence. Sarah froze. Emma had never called anyone that before. She looked at James. His eyes softened. His expression held everything. Hope. Love. A silent question. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. And then, she smiled. A single, soft nod. James's breath caught. He knelt down, pulling Emma into a tight hug. "I'd love that, sweetheart." Emma squealed with joy. Sarah watched them, her heart full. She had spent so long fighting to survive. And now, she was finally home. Life has a way of testing us, throwing obstacles in our path, making us doubt our strength. Like Sarah, many of us have faced moments where everything seemed lost, when dreams fell out of reach, and survival was the only goal. But Sarah's journey teaches us something powerful. Second chances exist, but we must be brave enough to take them. Sometimes, opportunities come disguised as risks. A new job, a move to a different city, trusting someone after heartbreak. Each of these moments demands courage. If Sarah had let fear win, she would have never discovered her true potential, her hidden family, or the love waiting for her all along. The truth? We are never truly alone. There are people out there, mentors, friends, and even strangers, who are willing to help, just as James and Rebecca did. The key is to recognize these moments and say yes to the possibilities. So, if life presents you with a door, dare to open it. If you feel lost, keep going. Because just like Sarah, your story is far from over. Your second chance is waiting. The end or the beginning. Believe in love? Comment "Love Conquers" all below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories.